It was supposed to be just another school photograph. Rows of neatly dressed children, each with that same polite smile. Behind them, a brick building, sunlit and ordinary. Nothing about it seemed remarkable. But when you look closer, something feels wrong. The smiles don't quite reach their eyes. One child's chair sits slightly empty, like someone was there, and then wasn't. In the far corner, a hand appears behind a student's shoulder, though no one is standing there in the next frame. And on the back of the photograph, faded by time, a single handwritten date, June 12, 1977. At first glance, this picture looks like a memory, but for those who lived through what followed, it became evidence. Soft piano notes creep in, low and haunting. For nearly 40 years, this photograph was forgotten, collecting dust in an old filing cabinet of a now-abandoned school. It was only when a journalist uncovered it during a property liquidation that questions began to resurface, questions the town of Brookvale had worked very hard to bury. Because behind these smiles, was the single most disturbing cover-up in American educational history. Audio, camera shutter clicks. Then silence. The school's name was Brookvale Academy for Gifted Youth. A private institution just outside a small Midwestern town. In the late 1970s, it was considered one of the most respected boarding schools in the region, funded by quiet government grants, praised for its innovative approach to child development. It attracted families from across the country, those who wanted the best for their children. But behind its perfect reputation, whispers grew, children leaving unexpectedly, teachers dismissed without explanation, entire student records missing from state databases. Most towns would have asked questions. Brookvale didn't. Brookvale just smiled for the camera. Tone darkens, low droning sound beneath narration. When you hold that photograph in your hands, you can almost feel the weight of it, a strange, cold energy, like the paper itself remembers what everyone else forgot. There's Evelyn Marsh, seated in the second row, her curls perfectly brushed. She was 11 when the photo was taken. She doesn't remember much about that day, only that the photographer kept telling them to smile wider. And in the front row, Darren Cole, the boy with freckles and a crooked tie. He looks away from the camera, almost distracted. Decades later, when shown this same photo, he whispered, "They told us we'd never have to take another one again." Then there's a figure standing at the end of the teacher's row, a woman with calm eyes and a soft expression. Her name was Dr. Miriam Halsey, the school's headmistress. Parents adored her. Officials respected her. But in the decades that followed, her name would appear in classified files, redacted under the label, Behavioral Conditioning Division, Project Edenfield. No one could explain why a child psychologist from a private school had federal clearance. Static distortion increases slightly, sound of old film reel turning. When this photograph resurfaced in 2016, an investigative reporter named Lauren Devane posted it online with the caption, "Anyone recognize this class? Year unknown. Location uncertain." Within days, hundreds of comments flooded in. Some people claimed they'd gone to that school. Others said they'd never heard of Brookvale, yet swore they recognized the building. And then, one woman replied, "That's me. I remember this day. But the person next to me, she shouldn't be there. She died before the photo was taken." Her name was Lila Tan, a former student who vanished from school records in 1978. That single comment turned a forgotten photograph into a national obsession. Researchers, true crime enthusiasts, even former government employees started digging. Each new lead opened another door, and each door revealed something darker. Music builds, tense, investigative rhythm. In the bottom corner of the image, just beneath the smiling faces, a small number is stamped. At first, it seemed like a cataloging mark from the photography studio. But forensic analysts discovered the same code appearing in declassified Cold War documents referring to Experiment E-41, Emotional Normalization Study. No one knew what that meant. Not yet. But one thing was clear, the smiling faces in that photograph weren't just students, they were subjects. And if that's true, then the real question isn't what happened after the photograph was taken, it's what happened before. Camera click sound again. Narration slows, voice softens. Every time you look at this picture, it stares back differently. Maybe it's the grain, the fading ink, or maybe it's something deeper, the sense that these children knew something was coming. Some say you can still see faint outlines in the background, a figure standing near the doorway, half in shadow. Others say that's just an illusion, a trick of the film. But one detail remains consistent in every surviving print, a tiny gap in the middle row, where one child should have been. There's no record of who that student was. No name, no file, no mention anywhere in the school archives. Just an empty space. If you drive west for about 2 hours from Chicago, you'll pass cornfields that stretch so far they almost swallow the horizon. Hidden somewhere between those endless rows once stood a small community called Brookvale. Today, it doesn't even appear on most maps. The post office closed in 1981. The population sign was taken down a few years later. But in the mid-1970s, Brookvale was thriving, the kind of place that looked like a magazine advertisement for the American dream. White fences. Fresh-cut lawns. Friday night football games under golden streetlights. It wasn't big enough to have its own mall, but it had something rarer, reputation. Everyone knew everyone. And everyone trusted each other. Soft acoustic guitar strums underneath. Brookvale Academy sat on a low hill overlooking the town. A 3-story brick building with ivy crawling up its walls and a bell tower that rang every morning at 8. To outsiders, it was a symbol of pride, a sign that even a small town could raise great minds. Local papers ran glowing stories, Brookvale's bright future. A new model for education. But for the people who lived there, something about the school always felt a little different. When parents dropped off their children, they weren't allowed past the front foyer. Visitors were limited to designated weekends. And once inside, students rarely spoke about what went on behind closed doors. Still, no one complained. Why would they? The town was prosperous. The school brought in jobs. And as long as Brookvale kept smiling, no one wanted to be the one to wipe that smile away. Ambient sound, wind rushing through trees, distant church bells. Narrator, softly on the surface, Brookvale was the perfect town, but listen closely, and you'd hear the cracks in its foundation. Old newspaper clippings mention electrical blackouts that lasted days, always centered around the school's district. A farmer's diary from 1976 describes a chemical odor in the air. 2 local dogs went missing and were found with identical surgical scars. The town's doctor, Harold Kleiner, filed multiple requests for health inspections at the academy. Every one of them was denied by state officials. Reason given: federal jurisdiction. Federal jurisdiction, in a tiny school of barely 80 students. That was the first sign something was wrong. Tape recorder clicks again, interview audio begins. Archival clip, former mayor, 1979, Brookvale Academy was the heartbeat of this town. Those kids were our future. We didn't know what they were teaching M in there, but we sure were proud of M. Narrator, when the academy first opened in 1969, it brought with it an aura of modernity. Computers before computers were common. Psychological testing before it was popular. It called itself an experiment in educational innovation. No one questioned what that meant. But by the summer of 1978, Brookvale changed. The streets grew quiet. Local businesses closed without notice. Parents stopped talking to one another. And then, overnight, the academy closed its doors. No announcement. No graduation. Just a letter mailed to every house in town, effective immediately: Brookvale Academy will cease operations. All records have been transferred to the Department of Education. Thank you for your support. There was no forwarding address. No explanation. And just like that, Brookvale was gone. Low rumble of thunder. The music shifts minor. Narrator, in the months that followed, the town began to empty out. Houses were abandoned mid-renovation. Stores boarded up. Those who stayed rarely spoke about the school. When asked, they'd simply say, "It's better left alone." Years later, when investigators returned to Brookvale, they found something stranger than ruins, a town frozen in time. Calendars still hung on walls, stuck on June 1978. Lunch menus in the diner hadn't been updated. And inside the academy's main hall, dust-covered desks were arranged as if students had just stepped out for recess and never came back. It was like someone had pressed pause on an entire community. Among the recovered artifacts was a collection of yearbooks. Only 3 years were ever printed, 1975, 1976, and 1977. The 1978 edition was never released. But within those pages, researchers noticed something odd. Student names repeated. Faces shifted rows between years. Some children appeared to age backward. One teacher's portrait was identical every year, same expression, same background, same blouse. As if the photo had been copied and pasted. When asked why, former staff members claimed they did not recall participating in any photographs. It was a town that remembered nothing, because it had been taught to forget. Wind howls through an empty street. Even the land itself seemed to resist memory. Satellite images from the early 2000s show strange discolorations in the soil where the academy once stood, perfect rectangles of dead grass, like buried foundations refusing to stay hidden. Some locals who grew up nearby say their compasses still malfunction within a mile of the old school grounds. Others swear they hear a bell ring at exactly 8 a.m. every day, even though the tower was demolished decades ago. Brookvale is quiet now, eerily so. Grass grows over the roads, and the only thing that moves is the wind through the corn. Yet for those who remember it, the town feels like a dream half-remembered, a place you swear you've been to, but can never find again. Music builds gently. Narrator, every generation creates its own myths, and Brookvale became one of them, the town that time forgot. A story parents told their kids on long drives past abandoned roads. Don't wander too far, they'd say. You might end up in Brookvale. But beneath those ghost stories was a real truth, and a real pain. Dozens of families who lost their children to a school that was never supposed to exist. Because while the rest of America moved on to new headlines, Watergate, Iran, the energy crisis, Brookvale was being scrubbed from the record entirely. Maps redrawn. Property deeds refiled. Birth certificates altered. The town wasn't just forgotten by time. It was erased by design. Sound, thunder cracks again, then quiet. Narrator, lower, slow. When the school closed in 1978, no one asked why. They just packed up, moved out, and let the grass grow over what was left. But 40 years later, when that school photo resurfaced online, the one with the smiling faces and the empty chair, Brookvale was forced back into the light. And this time, the people who once stayed silent were finally ready to speak. Music rises into a low drone of anticipation. For decades, Brookvale was a ghost story, a place whispered about, but never discussed. That changed when Lila Tan stepped forward. She was one of the few confirmed students of Brookvale Academy, a survivor. In 2016, after seeing the resurfaced class photograph, she reached out to journalists with a single message: "You're looking at the wrong part of the picture." When investigators finally met her in person, she was living alone in a small apartment on the outskirts of Detroit. Curtains drawn. Locks on every door. Her kitchen table was covered with stacks of old notebooks, faded photographs, and newspaper clippings, fragments of a life she'd been told to forget. Soft piano music fades in, melancholic, tense. Lila Tan, interview: "They told us we were special. That we were helping make the world better. But I don't think any of us really knew what that meant. Narrator, Lila wasn't alone. Two other former students came forward around the same time, Evelyn Marsh and Darren Cole. Each had lived a different life since the school's closure, yet all three described the same atmosphere of secrecy, fear, and something far more disturbing than mere strictness. Through their testimonies, the true face of Brookvale began to emerge. Sound, old film projector turning. A slideshow of yearbook images appears. Narrator, Evelyn Marsh had been 11 years old when the photo was taken. Today, she works as a social worker, helping foster children recover from trauma. When she first saw the image again, she froze. Evelyn Marsh, interview, we used to practice smiling. Every morning. The teachers would line us up and say, let's see those happy faces. If you didn't smile big enough, you had to do it again. Over and over. Until it looked real. Narrator, to Evelyn, the smiling drills seemed harmless at the time, a game. But she remembers one day a boy named Tommy couldn't stop crying. His parents had just visited, and he didn't want to go back to class. The headmistress, Dr. Halsey, asked him to show his joy. When he couldn't, he was taken to what the children called the quiet room. He never came back. Ambient audio fades, replaced by faint echo of wind through vents. Darren Cole, interview, rough voice, the quiet room wasn't quiet. You could hear things from inside. Whispering, humming, sometimes a scream. We were told not to look, not to listen. But I remember the smell. Like metal and medicine. Narrator, Darren Cole enlisted in the military at 17. He spent years convincing himself the memories were exaggerations, childhood distortions. But seeing that photograph again reawakened something. He points to a small figure in the back row, a boy with dark hair, looking away. Darren, softly, that's me. But the kid standing next to me, he wasn't there that day. I swear to you. They added him later. Sound, a tape rewinding, then clicking off. Narrator, Lila, Evelyn, and Darren had never spoken to each other since leaving Brookvale. Yet when investigators compared their accounts, the similarities were undeniable. Each described midnight lessons that didn't appear on schedules. Chants and phrases recited before bed. Memory tests disguised as games. And teachers who sometimes seemed drugged. One recalled waking up to find her roommate missing, replaced by another child who looked just like her, but didn't talk. Music shifts, darker tone, faint ticking clock. Narrator, when asked why they never told anyone, all three gave the same answer, they tried. Evelyn wrote letters home that never arrived. Darren's parents received postcards in handwriting that wasn't his. Lila remembers being told by Dr. Halsey herself that talking about Brookvale would mean starting all over again, a second chance, as she called it. Years later, when Evelyn requested her school records, the Department of Education replied that no such institution had ever existed. Static buzzes briefly, like a faulty radio signal. Narrator, somber, what happened inside those walls remains mostly speculation. But the survivors' testimonies point to one unsettling theme: conditioning. The school didn't just want obedient students, it wanted emotionally controlled subjects. Lila, voice trembling, they'd show us pictures of sad people and make us smile. They said sadness was weakness. That we were learning how to fix it. Narrator, as she speaks, her hands shake. She's not crying, she's trying not to. That's the lasting mark of Brookvale. Lila, quietly, if you cried, they'd take your photo. If you smiled, they let you eat. The room falls silent. Even after decades, the conditioning lingers, fear woven so deep into their nervous systems that emotion itself feels dangerous. Soft ticking sound. Close-up, a faded Polaroid photo on a table. Narrator, each survivor had kept something from their time there. Evelyn kept a small silver tag, stamped with the number 47. Darren still had a notebook filled with strange phrases, words he didn't remember writing. Lila had something else, a photograph. But this one was different. It showed the same classroom from the original school photo, only this time, it was empty. No children. No teachers. Just chairs, neatly arranged, facing a blank chalkboard. In the corner, barely visible, a shadow, the outline of someone standing just outside the frame. Lila, voice breaking, I found it in my parents' attic. I don't even know who took it. But I know what's underneath that floor. Music lowers, almost inaudible. Narrator, when pressed about what she meant, Lila refused to elaborate. She grew anxious, breathing fast. The interview ended abruptly. But 2 days later, she called the journalists back. She said she remembered a night, rain against the windows, lights flickering in the dorm halls. The teachers gathered the children in the gym. They were told it was a safety drill. Dr. Halsey stood at the microphone, smiling, her voice calm and rehearsed. Dr. Halsey, reenactment voice, you are all very special. Today we're going to help you forget your fears. Tomorrow, you'll wake up new. Lila says they were lined up, one by one, and led beneath the gym floor through a trapdoor she'd never noticed before. She remembers a long corridor, bright lights, and the sound of humming machines. Then, nothing. Lila, fading whisper, when I woke up, the school was empty. Everyone was gone. A beat of silence. Then, low static hum returning. Narrator, what exactly was beneath the gym remains unclear. Official records of the school's demolition make no mention of any underground structures. Yet aerial scans later revealed hollow spaces, evenly spaced, grid-like patterns, consistent with storage or containment facilities. Investigators petitioned to dig in 2017. Their request was denied by state authorities. The reason? Environmental hazard. Possible radiation contamination. Audio distorts briefly, low rumble beneath narration. Narrator, quiet, steady. 3 survivors. 3 stories that don't contradict, but complete each other. A missing boy. The quiet room. The photo drills. And a trapdoor no one else remembers seeing. Individually, they sound like trauma fragments. Together, they sound like truth. Lila would later withdraw from public view. Evelyn continues to advocate for victims of psychological abuse. Darren refuses all interviews, he says he doesn't dream anymore, and he's grateful for that. But before disappearing, Lila left one final note for the journalists investigating Brookvale. It was a single line, written in uneven handwriting, beneath the gym, you'll find the real smiles. Music swells, haunting, orchestral tones. In 2017, nearly 50 years after Brookvale Academy was shut down, a team of independent journalists and urban archaeologists gained access to the site. What they discovered beneath the gymnasium would change everything. It began with a rumor, a whispered warning from a local demolition worker who claimed that the ground was wrong. He said the soil beneath the gym didn't feel natural. It was hollow. Sound, metallic clang, echoing footsteps in an empty hall. When the team arrived, the area was overgrown and fenced off. The main building was gone, only the cracked concrete foundation remained. But the gym, half collapsed and waterlogged, still stood. Beneath its rotting floorboards, they found it, a small iron hatch, bolted shut, hidden under layers of debris and rust. It wasn't on any architectural plan. Narrator, at first, they thought it was a storm drain. But the bolts were military grade, far stronger than anything needed for a school facility. After hours of careful work, the hatch finally gave way, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. Sound, creaking metal, flashlight clicks on. The air that rose up from below was thick and chemical. One of the team members, historian Dr. Marcus Hale, later described it as the smell of sterilization, like a hospital that had been sealed for decades. Dr. Hale, recorded interview, "It wasn't built to store equipment. It was built to contain something. Low hum intensifies. Flashlights sweep across a narrow corridor lined with white tiles." Narrator, "The staircase led to a corridor, roughly 20 feet long, leading to a series of reinforced doors. The walls were smooth, tiled, and sterile. No graffiti. No signs of decay, except for faint brown stains near the floor. Each door bore a faded label. Most were unreadable. But one was still legible, Laboratory 3B. Field log, audio record, Hale, 2:14 a.m. Room 3B. Door partially jammed. Smells metallic. Seeing, tables. Glass partitions. What looks like, restraints. Sound, glass crunching under boots. Inside, they found a collection of broken surgical instruments, overturned stools, and rows of small metal beds. The sheets were stiff, as if fused to the frames by time. And above each bed, a mirror. But behind those mirrors, investigators would later find camera lenses. Narrator, "The entire underground facility had been designed to observe, not heal. Every corridor connected to a central observation hub, a circular room filled with recording equipment, spools of magnetic tape, and dozens of screens, long since shattered. On one wall, a faded sign read, 'Emotional Response Testing, Project Smile.' Music cue, deep drone, tension rising." Narrator, lower, deliberate Project Smile. The phrase appeared again and again throughout the documents recovered from the site, handwritten memos, coded schedules, and logs signed with the initials D.H. Dr. Halsey. The woman who once ran Brookvale Academy wasn't just a headmistress. She was overseeing a psychological experiment. Static crackle. Voice distortions from recovered tapes. Archive tape, female voice, calm, clinical, subject 47 failed to maintain eye contact during simulation. Increase auditory stimulus. Reinforce positive conditioning through mirror reinforcement. Soft hum of machinery. A child sobbing faintly in the background. Archive tape, same voice, smiling must be instinct. Not choice. Click. Tape ends. Narrator, "Hush." The recording was authenticated by 3 separate forensic labs. The voice matched fragments found in a university archive from the 1960s, belonging to Dr. Miriam Halsey, former behavioral scientist at the Harrington Institute for Neurological Research. She had disappeared in 1972, the same year Brookvale closed. Narrator, investigators began piecing together what Project Smile truly was. The evidence suggested Brookvale was a front for behavioral conditioning trials, funded through shell organizations connected to Cold War-era psychological research. The goal? To suppress emotional responses in children, to create individuals who could not feel fear, grief, or empathy. In theory, such subjects could become perfect candidates for intelligence work, or worse, obedient citizens in a future society built on control. Dr. Hale, interview, "It sounds insane now, but back then, behavioral manipulation was considered a frontier science. They believed they could rewire emotion itself." Music, low, eerie strings. Narrator, "Further down the corridor, the team found the quiet room, exactly where the survivors said it would be. The door was heavier than the others, its handle corroded but intact. Inside, the walls were covered in a thick black paint. There were no windows, no light fixtures, just a single chair bolted to the center of the floor. Attached to the chair's arms were rusted cuffs. A small speaker sat embedded in the ceiling. When they powered the room's circuitry using portable equipment, the speaker crackled to life. A voice whispered, "You are calm. You are smiling. The world loves you when you smile." Then, silence. Long pause. Faint sound of breathing through gas mask. Narrator, "The recording sent chills through even the most skeptical members of the team. It was proof, the children had been subjected to repeated audio conditioning, reinforcing compliance and emotional suppression. And the technology wasn't primitive. The wiring was advanced, far beyond what most educational institutions could afford in the early 1960s. Someone had funded this. Someone powerful. Sound, paper rustling, distant thunder again. Narrator, hidden behind a false wall in the observation room, they discovered a locked cabinet containing dozens of sealed canisters, all labeled with alphanumeric codes. Inside were human tissue samples. Each carefully preserved, catalogued, and dated between 1963 and 1971. Lab analysis confirmed traces of adrenaline inhibitors, chemicals designed to suppress emotional and stress reactions. Some of these compounds didn't officially exist until years later. Low drone deepens. A single piano note echoes. Dr. Hale recorded, they weren't just studying behavior. They were changing biology. Trying to erase emotion itself. Narrator, at the far end of the facility, the final chamber, marked Observation Theater, held the most chilling evidence of all. Rows of small chairs, child-sized, faced a projection screen. On the floor beneath the seats, investigators found grooves, as if something heavy had been dragged away long ago. When they powered the projector, a film reel flickered to life. Sound, projector rattling, film crackling. The footage showed children sitting perfectly still, smiling at the camera. In the corner, Dr. Halsey took notes. Every few seconds, a blinding flash filled the room. The children didn't flinch. One frame froze on a close-up of a little girl, her eyes wide, her smile trembling. Behind her, a dark shape moved along the wall, human-like but distorted. Then, the reel cut off. Film snaps. Silence. Narrator, quietly the footage was real. It was dated October 12, 1971, the night Lila Tan claimed she was led beneath the gym. That was the last night Brookvale Academy existed. Shortly after, fire records show the school experienced a mysterious, boiler malfunction, that destroyed much of the property. Official cause, accidental combustion. But no one ever investigated what happened to the underground complex. Until now. Sound, fire crackling faintly, layered under rain. Narrator, when the team surfaced, local authorities immediately sealed the site, citing contamination risks. All recovered materials were confiscated. Within weeks, the area was reclassified as private government property. Dr. Hale resigned from his university post soon after. He refused interviews, except one. In that final interview, he made a cryptic statement, "They told us we were too late." But the experiments didn't end in Brookvale. They just moved. Low mechanical hum builds beneath his words. In the months following the Brookvale excavation, attention turned to one name that kept resurfacing in every document, every file, every audio fragment, the Harrington Foundation for Cognitive Advancement. It sounded harmless. Respectable, even. On paper, Harrington was a philanthropic organization devoted to educational innovation and child psychology. It had funded dozens of programs across the Midwest, many involving schools, clinics, and youth centers. Its motto, "For a happier, more obedient tomorrow," was printed on every pamphlet, every grant proposal. No one questioned it. But behind the smiling logo and polished press releases lay something older, colder, and much more calculated. Sound, faint clatter of old film reels being boxed. The foundation was created in 1958 by a man named Dr. Raymond Harrington, a former Navy psychologist who had worked on classified sensory deprivation experiments during the Korean War. According to declassified memos, his research focused on inducing compliance through cognitive fatigue. The idea was simple: if the human mind could be trained to shut down under emotional strain, it could also be trained to obey. By 1961, Harrington had turned that idea into an institution. He used his wartime connections to attract funding from military think tanks and corporate sponsors. Brookvale Academy, as it turned out, was one of dozens of educational fronts tied to his research. Music, deep bass drone, muffled heartbeat. Investigators uncovered tax records linking Brookvale's construction to shell companies, Lyra Educational Systems, Aegis Behavioral Research, and Harrington Cognitive Labs. Each funneled money through foreign banks, obscuring their origin. One account led to a Swiss institution known for handling covert defense contracts. The pattern was unmistakable. Brookvale wasn't an accident. It was part of a network. Sound, faint projector hum. Among the confiscated files recovered by Dr. Hale's assistant was a faded photograph, a conference room filled with men in suits. At the head of the table sat Dr. Halsey, younger, sharper, eyes bright with zeal. Behind her, a banner read, Harrington Foundation, Phase 3 begins. Phase 3. No other record of Phase 1 or 2 existed. But the language suggested a progression, a sequence, the kind of terminology used in research trials. Somewhere, in hidden archives, earlier phases had taken place. Sound, turning pages, whispered voices overlapping. Digging through university libraries, journalists found traces of those earlier programs. Phase 1, the mirror study, conducted at the Harrington Institute itself in 1959. Phase 2, Operation Halo, a behavioral experiment performed on military orphans in 1964. Each project followed a similar pattern, a controlled environment, smiling subjects, and a focus on emotional suppression through repetitive conditioning. By the time Phase 3 began in Brookvale, the experiment had shifted toward integration, testing whether conditioned subjects could live among normal populations without detection. The town had been the laboratory. The school, the control center. Soft ticking clock fades in. In the summer of 2018, one of Hale's former assistants, a woman named Clara Wynne, came forward with her own discovery. She claimed to have stolen a series of internal memos before the Brookvale site was locked down. The documents referenced subject continuation initiatives, implying that not all the test children had perished or disappeared. Some had been relocated. Her most disturbing claim, several names from Brookvale's 1977 class list matched those of adults currently employed at Harrington-affiliated research facilities. Music shifts into tense strings. Clara described visiting one such facility in upstate New York, officially a neuroscience rehabilitation center. Inside, she met a man named Eli Carter, who said he had vague childhood memories of a place with mirrors. When shown the recovered class photograph from Brookvale, Eli went silent for nearly 2 minutes, then whispered, "She told us to keep smiling. Even when it hurt." He refused further interviews and vanished 2 weeks later. Sound, police radio static, then cut. Through Freedom of Information Act requests, journalists discovered that the Harrington Foundation still received federal grants, even as late as 2009. The organization had rebranded several times, Novamind Institute, the Lucent Group, Project Halo Research, but its leadership remained the same lineage of scientists and corporate donors tracing back to Dr. Harrington himself. Publicly, they supported emotional regulation therapy for children with behavioral challenges. Privately, leaked proposals showed discussions about neurological obedience enhancement. The parallels to Brookvale were undeniable. Ambient hum of fluorescent lights, soft typing. One particular file, dated 1973, included a chilling letter written by Dr. Halsey herself, "Our progress in the smile conditioning model exceeds projections." The subjects exhibit marked reduction in distress responses. However, prolonged exposure results in dissociation and cognitive fragmentation. Recommend relocation of viable candidates before full breakdown. The memo was signed and countersigned by Raymond Harrington. Pause. Low rumble builds underneath. When confronted by journalists decades later, surviving members of the foundation denied any involvement. One executive insisted the documents were Cold War relics taken out of context. Another laughed off the idea of underground experiments as urban legend. But beneath their polished denials, discrepancies piled up. Birth records of known Brookvale students were altered or destroyed. Court archives showed sealed settlements with families across multiple states. And most tellingly, the official archives of the Department of Education listed no record of Brookvale Academy ever existing. Music deepens, piano notes echo like footsteps. In 2020, a retired government archivist anonymously uploaded several scanned pages from what appeared to be a Harrington internal audit. The document referenced continuing research through neural calibration programs and partnerships with early cognitive interface prototypes. Translation: they'd moved from psychological conditioning to technological control. Sound: faint beeping of medical monitors. What began as mirrors and mantras had evolved into algorithms and implants. Emotional obedience was no longer taught, it was coded. Some of the leaked files included blueprints for wearable devices described as mood regulators, intended for educational behavioral management. Each contained microsensors capable of monitoring brain activity. The branding proposal called them smile bands. Sharp mechanical click, heartbeat sound resumes. When confronted with the name, one surviving researcher reportedly went pale. He whispered, "We tried that once, it never stopped." Music rises softly, static layers in. A month after the leaks, Clara Wynne disappeared. Her apartment was found untouched, her phone left on the kitchen table, recording. The last thing she said on the tape was barely audible, "It's not over. They're still smiling." Then, silence. Low hum fades into faint children's laughter echoing in reverb. As investigators dug deeper, they found one final connection, a list of coordinates embedded within a set of archived Harrington patents. One coordinate pointed directly to the outskirts of New Brookvale, Illinois, a recently developed suburban community built on the same land where the academy once stood. The developer's parent company? Harrington Urban Renewal Group. Sound: wind through construction scaffolding, hammer strikes slow down. The town looked new, clean, safe. Streets named after virtues: Harmony Avenue, Faith Drive, Serenity Court. Security cameras on every corner, built-in smart home systems for peace of mind. The advertisements all carried the same slogan, where every day begins with a smile. Long pause. Music fades to stillness. The past wasn't buried. It had been renovated. And if you drive through New Brookvale today, the houses gleam, the lawns are perfect, and the people are always smiling. Too perfectly. Between the closure of Brookvale Academy in 1978 and the rediscovery of its remains decades later, there was a gap, 20 years of silence. Officially, nothing happened. No investigations, no press coverage, no public record. It was as if the town and everyone connected to it had been swallowed whole by time. But silence can be deceiving. Researchers who followed the trail of Brookvale's disappearance began calling this period the missing years. It was during these 2 decades that the remnants of Project Smile scattered and evolved, hidden beneath new names, buried in plain sight. Sound: quiet page turning, clock ticking in background. In 1983, a private school opened in Ohio under the name the Meridian Learning Institute. Its brochures looked ordinary: children playing, bright classrooms, slogans about developing emotional intelligence. Yet buried in its founding documents was a signature: M. Halsey. The same Dr. Miriam Halsey who had supposedly died in a car crash 5 years earlier. Low hum begins, electric, uneasy. A local journalist, Edward Vail, grew suspicious. He'd heard rumors from teachers about strange exercises, children told to practice smiling for extended periods, mirrors installed in every classroom, and a reward system based on emotional stillness. When Vail began asking questions, the school abruptly shut down. Within weeks, he lost his job. His car was found abandoned near a lake. No body was ever recovered. Sound: ripple of water, faint echo of a scream carried by wind. Vale's notes, later recovered from his storage unit, contained an address scribbled across the top page, Harrington Archives, Chicago Branch. The date was May 9, 1986, just days before he vanished. The following year, a brief article appeared in an education trade magazine. It mentioned a new cognitive behavior curriculum being tested in select schools under the sponsorship of the Harrington Foundation. The program's title was eerily familiar, Smile Initiative. Music, subtle piano pattern builds under narration. According to internal memos leaked years later, the Smile Initiative was a nationwide pilot, testing nonverbal reinforcement through classroom environments. Students wore wristbands that vibrated when their emotional responses exceeded certain thresholds. Officially, the devices were marketed as stress regulators. But deep within the patents lay an algorithm derived from Brookvale's research data, Project SM-1. SM, Smile Model 1. Pause. Static crackles. By the early 1990s, Project SM-1 was rebranded again under a new organization, the Lucent Group, one of Harrington's later shell companies. They moved from schools to clinics, testing their technology on children diagnosed with behavioral disorders. The results were described as highly promising. Parents were told their kids were calmer, more compliant, more focused. But the same reports quietly noted an alarming side effect: diminished emotional range. Children no longer cried. They no longer laughed naturally. Their smiles became mechanical, automatic responses to cues. Music softens, heartbeat-like rhythm begins. In 1994, one of the lead researchers, Dr. Althea Morris, broke ranks. She published a confidential paper titled The Persistence of the Smile Reflex. In it, she described a recurring phenomenon among test subjects: spontaneous smiling triggered by fluorescent light frequencies. Her findings were dismissed as pseudoscience. Weeks later, she was found dead in her lab, the coroner citing electrical malfunction. Her colleagues were transferred to another facility. Sound, flickering lights, electricity buzzing. Meanwhile, survivors from Brookvale, those who had escaped as children, were beginning to surface. One of them, a man named Daniel Finch, reached out to an independent filmmaker in 1997. In a grainy interview, Daniel described waking up in unfamiliar homes throughout the 1980s, each time under a new name, each time told by adults that he was part of something important. He remembered flashes of white rooms, the smell of alcohol swabs, and a woman's voice saying, "You don't need to feel anymore. Just smile." Soft piano echoes, faint breathing audible. The footage was never broadcast. The filmmaker, Lydia Monroe, was killed in a hit-and-run accident 2 weeks before her documentary's release. The tapes vanished from her studio. Only a single copy surfaced decades later, uploaded anonymously to a hidden forum. The title on the file read simply, Brookvale Testimony 01. Low-frequency rumble builds. During the missing years, something else occurred, a quiet consolidation of power. The Harrington Foundation acquired stakes in pharmaceutical companies, education software firms, and later, biometric research startups. Their motto evolved, too. For a happier, more obedient tomorrow, became, building emotional stability through science. The language softened. The intent remained. Sound, keyboard clicking, printer whirring. In 1999, a new division was created, Harrington Cognitive Solutions. Their flagship product was an early neural feedback headset designed to improve emotional learning in children. Promotional footage showed smiling students wearing lightweight headbands as teachers praised their progress. But if you slowed the footage, just for a second, one detail stood out, the insignia printed inside the device's band. A simple circle with a curved line beneath it. The Brookvale smile. Music dips, the hum of fluorescent light swells, then cuts. By the turn of the millennium, the missing years had ended, at least on paper. The experiments had evolved beyond crude behavioral trials. They'd become digital, data-driven, hidden behind glossy educational slogans. No one remembered Brookvale anymore. The survivors were ghosts. The documents were locked away. The smiling faces of children on magazine covers looked no different from the ones in that haunting class photo, innocent, hopeful, unknowing. Sound, faint echo of children laughing, distant thunder rolls. But those who had lived through it, the ones who remembered the quiet room, the mirrors, the voice from the ceiling, they knew the truth. They called themselves the Forgotten Eight. A secret network of former subjects scattered across the country, now adults, connected through encrypted online forums. They shared fragments of memory, flashes of lights, the taste of metal, the endless smiling drills. And one day, one of them uploaded a photo that would reignite everything. A new class picture. Same composition. Same empty chair. The caption read, 2020, New Brookvale Elementary. The music stops abruptly. Silence stretches. Then the faint sound of a bell ringing 8 times. The missing years were over. The experiment had begun again. They called themselves the Forgotten Eight. 8 survivors who had vanished as children from Brookvale Academy in 1978 and somehow resurfaced decades later, scattered across the United States, living under assumed identities. None of them remembered how they'd escaped. None of them knew each other by name. But each carried the same mark, a crescent-shaped scar behind the left ear. It began in an obscure corner of the internet, a forgotten message board hosted on a server registered to no one. In 2003, a user named subject_07 posted a photograph, a child's drawing of a smiling sun with hollow eyes. Beneath it, just 2 words, "Do you remember?" Within hours, 7 others replied. Sound, typing, message alerts pinging softly. Their usernames, Echo1, Mira13, Finch_78, Quiet Room, Anna_Smiles, Prototype 5, and a Mirror. None knew each other. Yet their memories overlapped with eerie precision. The same white corridors. The same instruction, smile until it stops hurting. At first, they thought it was an elaborate hoax, some internet urban legend. But then came the photographs. Each member uploaded an image of the scar. The same shape, the same faint surgical stitch pattern. That's when fear turned into purpose. Music, low, pulsing rhythm like a heartbeat. They began tracing fragments of their pasts, hospital records, foster home transfers, name changes. One of them, Mira, uncovered an adoption file with the name Harrington Child Development Program stamped across the top. Another, Daniel Finch, recognized the woman in a blurry newspaper clipping, Dr. Miriam Halsey, presumed dead in 1978, now appearing at a conference on neurobehavioral science in 1995 under the alias Dr. M. Hale. Every discovery deepened the nightmare. Sound, papers flipping, muffled tape recorder clicks. Through encrypted chats, they built what they called the archive. A growing database of everything linked to Brookvale and the Smile Initiative, memos, patents, research logs, and photographs. Many of the documents were marked, classified, Harrington Cognitive Solutions. Others bore cryptic project titles like Re-entry Phase and Behavioral Sync Index. But there was one file that froze them all. A digital image labeled simply, SM02. It showed 8 children seated in a classroom, each wearing metallic headbands connected to wires. In the center stood a woman facing away from the camera, her hand resting on a control panel. On the wall behind them, written in chalk, "Smile until they believe you're happy." The date, March 14, 1978. Music fades into uneasy silence. From that moment, the 8 knew, they hadn't escaped. They'd been released. Static rises, a distant voice counting, 1, 2, 3, they started to vanish again, one by one. In 2004, Echo1 stopped responding. His account was deleted, his IP address traced to a psychiatric facility in Colorado, a building owned by a Harrington subsidiary. Officially, there was no record of a patient under his name. The next year, Anna_Smiles posted a disturbing video before her profile went dark. In the footage, she stood in front of a mirror, whispering, "It's coming back." Her reflection smiled seconds before she did. Then the screen went black. Low hum returns, mimicking electrical interference. The remaining members went underground. They began using physical drop points, leaving encrypted USB drives in bus terminals, libraries, even inside hollowed-out books at thrift stores. Their messages became increasingly paranoid. They monitor light frequencies. Do not look at mirrors for too long. Harrington never died, it adapted. In 2007, journalist Eli Moran, investigating unexplained disappearances linked to private mental health clinics, received an anonymous envelope. Inside, a photo of a smiling child with the words, "We never stopped smiling," written on the back. Also enclosed, a USB stick containing fragments of the archive. Eli's exposé never ran. He disappeared days before it was due to publish. His laptop was found, wiped clean except for one corrupted file titled Smile_Protocol. AVI. Sound, faint whispering, the crack of VHS distortion. The file opened to static, then the faint outline of 8 figures sitting in a dark room. Their faces blurred, their bodies motionless. A distorted voice repeated, "Smile for the camera." The forgotten 8 were fading, not just from the world, but from memory itself. Their online records were deleted, birth certificates sealed, social security numbers invalidated. It was as if someone, or something, was erasing their existence. Soft drone, distant heartbeat sound grows louder. Yet one of them remained, subject_07. In 2010, a series of blog posts appeared under that name on a hidden forum titled Project_Resonance. The posts read like a confession. Subject_07 claimed to have recovered footage from the original Brookvale experiments, reels labeled SM1 through SM3. According to him, the final tape showed the moment the smile reflex was perfected. He described it like this: "They taught us that happiness was obedience. They measured it in stillness, in the absence of fear. But when fear stopped, something else took its place, something that watched through us." Music deepens, haunting, droning, layered with faint whispers. 2 months later, his account stopped posting. But before it vanished, one final message appeared: "They're building it again. Same name. Same walls. Check Illinois." Attached was a low-resolution photo, a construction site sign reading, Brookvale Academy, opening 2020. Sponsored by Harrington Foundation. Sound, thunder crack, then silence. By 2020, the name Brookvale returned, this time as a state-of-the-art emotional wellness school for children. The smiling logo was the same as before. The press called it a new era in education. But in the shadows of the internet, whispers began circulating again. Videos of children in classrooms lit by flickering fluorescent lights. Reports of students with faint scars behind their ears. Teachers who vanished mid-semester. Someone was watching. And then, one night, an email reached an investigative podcaster named Rachel Miles. The subject line read, "We're still here." The message contained only one attachment, an image of 8 empty desks in a classroom. On each desk sat a small mirror, and beneath each mirror, a note that read, "Smile for us." Sound, static bursts, faint children's laughter echoing from nowhere. The forgotten 8 were not gone. They had become something else. When Brookvale Academy reopened in 2020, the world saw a story of redemption. A once-forgotten institution reborn under the Harrington Foundation for Emotional Development, promising to revolutionize education through neuroscience. Their slogan read, "Happiness Engineered." The media celebrated it. Local politicians cut ribbons. Parents lined up to enroll their children, drawn by promises of holistic emotional growth. Every classroom boasted advanced neurofeedback systems, sensors that read students' emotional states to help them manage stress. Cameras blinked from every corner, tracking smiles and frowns like data points. To most, it looked like the future. But to those who knew the past, the whispers, the scars, the vanished, it looked like a resurrection. Music, slow, echoing piano. One note lingers too long. Journalist Rachel Miles, who'd received the eerie "we're still here" email, began digging into the new Brookvale's origins. She found the school's funding came from a shell company registered in Delaware, Halcyon Education Systems. Its board members? Untraceable. Its CEO? A woman named Dr. Miriam Hale, the same alias once linked to Dr. Miriam Halsey. Rachel tried to contact the school directly. She was politely denied a tour. For privacy and child safety reasons, the receptionist said. But something in her tone sounded rehearsed, robotic, almost. So Rachel did what she always did, she went in anyway. Sound, faint wind, crunch of gravel underfoot. On a rainy afternoon, she parked a half-mile from the school's main gate and approached through the forest trail that bordered the property. Through the chain-link fence, she saw children playing on a spotless field, laughing, running. But what chilled her wasn't their joy. It was how synchronized they were. Each movement, each laugh, seemed to happen on cue, like a perfectly timed performance. And then she saw it, a tall woman in a gray coat, standing still among the children, not smiling, just watching. Her face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. Music grows tense, low hum beneath narration. Inside the main building, everything gleamed, glass, chrome, and spotless white walls. At the entrance, a quote was engraved on steel, "To eliminate pain, we must redefine joy." Dr. Miriam Hale Rachel managed to speak to one staff member, Mr. Corbin, who introduced himself as the Emotional Stability Coordinator. He guided her down a corridor lined with framed photos, all showing smiling students. She asked what made Brookvale different. "We teach happiness scientifically," he said, smiling too wide. "We measure the neurological consistency of emotional expression." She pressed further. "And what happens when a child isn't happy?" The man paused. His smile flickered. "We help them adjust." Sound, faint electrical hum returns, like distant static. Later, while exploring the staff wing, Rachel noticed something strange. A door marked, "Restricted, Biofeedback Calibration Lab." Through the glass slit, she saw rows of monitors displaying children's faces. Each face had colored lines tracking facial movements, the corners of lips, the creases of eyes. Next to each image, numerical scores flickered rapidly. SMR Index, one label read. Rachel jotted it down. She didn't know it yet, but SMR stood for Smile Modulation Response, the same term found in the archived Brookvale experiments from 1978. Sound, faint static pulse, heartbeat rhythm starts. Back at her apartment, Rachel started piecing it all together. Old Brookvale records. The Forgotten Eights files. Modern patents under Halcyon Education. Every line led to one phrase repeated across decades, Project Resonance. Then she found a video hidden deep within the school's public server, a promotional clip that hadn't yet been released. It opened with serene music and a narrator saying, "At Brookvale, we believe happiness is the key to human potential." The visuals showed children wearing thin metallic bands around their heads, eerily similar to the devices seen in the old Smile Initiative photos. Voice distortion, the narrator continues softly, "Our goal is to synchronize the human emotional frequency." Rachel froze the frame and zoomed in. On one child's neck, a faint, crescent-shaped scar. Music stops abruptly. The next day, she received an anonymous message from a blocked number, "Stop digging. You're not supposed to see them." She ignored it. Instead, she went back to Brookvale at night, breaking through a side maintenance door. The interior was silent, sterile. The lights flickered faintly. In one classroom, she found a computer still logged in. The desktop wallpaper was the school logo, a smiling sun. She opened a folder named Performance Metrics. Inside were video thumbnails, labeled session_47A, session_48B, and SM02_ sound, faint VHS noise as file opens. The footage was in black and white. It showed a group of students seated in perfect rows, facing the camera. A voice off-screen instructed, "Begin exercise." One by one, their expressions changed, fear, confusion, and then, the same wide, fixed smile. Rachel's hand trembled. She paused the video, heart pounding. In the reflection on the screen, she saw something, behind her, in the darkened classroom, a faint silhouette. She turned. Nothing. Just silence. But when she looked back, the paused image had changed. The children's faces were now looking directly at her. Loud static burst. Music surges. Rachel slammed the laptop shut and ran. Her breathing echoed in the corridor. As she passed the steel quote again, "To eliminate pain, we must redefine joy." She noticed something dripping beneath it. A faint red smear trailing downward, like a tear. Sound, low rumble, thunder outside. She made it outside, into the storm, gasping for air. From across the field, she saw the classroom still lit, silhouettes of children sitting motionless, even at midnight. And among them, that same woman in the gray coat, still watching, still smiling. Rachel's last journal entry, written hours later, read, "Brookvale isn't a school. It's a continuation. They're trying to finish what they started in 1978. And whatever it is, it's working." The next morning, Rachel was gone. Her apartment door left open, her computer missing, her car still in the driveway. The only thing found on her desk was a printed photo of the new Brookvale Academy, and on the back, a handwritten message in red ink, "Smile for the world, Rachel. My name doesn't matter," the voice says. What matters is, they're doing it again. And no one's stopping them. That tape was mailed anonymously to a journalist at the Sentinel Review in 2021. It came inside a plain brown envelope with no return address, postmarked from Illinois. Alongside the tape was a USB drive labeled only, WF_archive_01, the whistleblower files. At first, the editor dismissed it as another conspiracy hoax. But the accompanying documents, blueprints, medical scans, classified memos, were too detailed to ignore. Each file bore the logo of the Harrington Foundation and the name of its subsidiary, Halcyon Neurobehavioral Research. The documents weren't just about Brookvale Academy. They referenced 23 other facilities across the U.S., all operating under the guise of emotional wellness centers, youth rehabilitation clinics, and advanced learning institutes. Each shared the same operational code, Smile/2. 0, music, slow, ominous electronic tone. The sound of pages turning. The whistleblower, identified in later leaks as Dr. Alan Sutter, had worked as a senior neurofeedback technician at Halcyon between 2017 and 2020. His testimony painted a chilling picture. According to Sutter, Brookvale was not merely a school. It was a data harvesting facility for emotional calibration, a place where children's brainwave responses to fear, joy, and pain were monitored, altered, and weaponized. He claimed that the goal was to create predictable emotional compliance, a state where the human mind could be conditioned to smile through trauma, to suppress dissent through enforced calm. They called it the Smile Protocol. His recorded voice trembled. "We were told it was therapeutic. But it wasn't therapy. It was erasure. Sound, faint distortion, heartbeat pulse." He described how electrodes were implanted beneath the skin near the auditory nerve, forming the crescent-shaped scars noted in previous victims. The devices weren't mere monitors, they were feedback regulators, capable of sending subliminal electrical impulses to induce compliance responses. Imagine, he said, a world where emotion can be controlled like a switch, where grief, anger, or fear could be deleted at will. That's what they wanted. A society that smiles because it's told to. Low ambient hum intensifies, as if machinery is powering up. The documents included internal memos from the 1970s Harrington trials, long thought to be destroyed. One line, handwritten by Dr. Miriam Halsey herself, read, "Pain is the seed of disobedience. To end it, we must end feeling." Rachel Miles' name appeared several times in the file metadata. Somehow, she had accessed these same archives before vanishing. Her laptop logs revealed an attempted upload to multiple encrypted journalist platforms the night she disappeared, the same hour Halcyon's servers were remotely purged. Sound, typing, error tones repeating, access denied. Then came the most disturbing part, photographs labeled, Phase 3, Classroom Integration. They showed children sitting in perfect rows, each wearing silver headbands. But beneath the photos were neurological graphs, jagged red lines flattening into calm, steady waves. The captions read, Subject 07, Optimal Sync Achieved. One of the children, a girl with curly dark hair and hollow eyes, was identified as Anna M., age 9. Her file number matched one of the original Forgotten 8. Music fades into soft static, then, the sound of a deep exhale. Dr. Sutter's voice returned on the tape. I didn't believe it at first. They told us these were simulations, avatars generated by emotional modeling software. But then I saw one of them move. I saw her breathe. He paused. They're alive. Sound, the tape clicks, rewinds slightly, then continues. Sutter detailed how the Foundation had digitized portions of children's consciousness through neuro-emotional mapping, uploading fragments of real human behavior into artificial intelligence prototypes. Each student was part biological, part digital, existing simultaneously in the physical world and the internal, Smile network. He described Room 9, a sealed lab beneath the school where teachers never entered. You could hear humming down there, he said, like hundreds of tiny voices speaking at once. They called it the choir. The choir, according to his documents, was an array of servers that housed emotional resonance backups, essentially the stored neural patterns of test subjects. They were preserving them, Sutter said. Not to help them, to reuse them. Sound, low-frequency drone, mechanical beeping. Then came a video file from the USB drive, titled WF_CAM03. It appeared to be surveillance footage from within the Brookvale basement. The timestamp, 3:12 a.m., April 18, 2020. The camera panned across a dim hallway lined with locked doors. From behind one of them came a faint sound, humming, soft and childlike. The lens zoomed in. Words appeared scratched into the metal door, "We're still learning to smile." Moments later, the lights flickered. A figure moved across the hallway, small, childlike, but when it turned, its face was blank. No eyes. This is the last time I'll speak. If you're hearing this, it means the others are gone. They've shut everything down, except the signal. The voice belonged to Eli Moran, the journalist who vanished in 2007 after investigating the Smile Initiative. Somehow, after nearly 15 years, his voice had returned, not live, but through a live-stream broadcast that appeared without warning on over 300 YouTube channels and dark web mirrors simultaneously. Viewers described it as a glitching feed, grainy and flickering between frames of static and an abandoned classroom. On the blackboard behind Eli, faint chalk writing read, "Brookvale never ended." Music, low, trembling piano keys, irregular, like a heartbeat. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow, but his expression eerily calm, the calm of a man who had seen something he could never unsee. "I've been underground for years," he said. "They let me live because they thought I was broken. They were wrong. I remembered." He lifted a stack of papers, faded blueprints, medical forms, photographs. They called it the Smile Network now, a system built on human emotion, a frequency that rewires memory itself. They're no longer experimenting on children. They're using us. Glitch sound, faint echo of overlapping voices repeating, us, us, us. Eli explained that the Smile protocol had evolved into a digital infrastructure, embedded within apps, emotional AI tools, even wellness devices. The cameras, the microphones, the mood trackers, all collecting emotional resonance data to refine the same algorithm once born in Brookvale's basement. He leaned closer to the lens, whispering, they learned how to spread it through screens. Every time you smile into your phone, it watches back. Sound distortion, feedback squeal, then soft laughter layered beneath. The screen flickered, cutting to footage of what looked like a laboratory. Rows of glowing monitors displayed human faces, each smiling, looping endlessly. Their expressions never changed, their eyes unblinking. Eli's voiceover continued, these are the original subjects. The Forgotten Eight weren't destroyed, they were digitized. Their neural patterns became templates. Every emotional recognition software on the planet runs on them now. Soft whisper in background, smile for us. The feed glitched again, showing a brief frame of a logo, Harrington Cognitive Systems, now rebranded as NeuroWell. Global. The tagline beneath, because happiness is humanity. Eli continued, voice shaking, I found the main server. It's not in Illinois anymore. It's in Nevada, beneath an abandoned broadcasting station. They're calling it the Choir Hub. That's where all the emotional data converges, where every smile, every expression, is synchronized. They say it's to stabilize humanity's emotional climate. But what it's really doing, is teaching us to obey. Music deepens, slow industrial pulse, layered with faint children's humming. He held up a USB drive. This is everything, every file they tried to erase, every experiment they called therapy. But there's something else on here too. Something they didn't mean to leave behind. He inserted the drive into a laptop. The feed split into two windows, one showing Eli, the other displaying a directory labeled /archive/project_smile/redacted/. One by one, file names appeared, smr_core_v7. Log subject 07_memory loop. Dat choir _synchronization_sequence. MP4M, Halsey_directive. TXT. He clicked the last one. The text file opened to reveal only a few lines. Phase 4 begins when the network achieves 80 emotional resonance alignment. Projected date, October 31, 2025. Initiate smile event. Eli's hands trembled. That's today, he whispered. Music halts. Only the sound of a low electrical hum remains. He explained that the Smile event was designed to trigger a global, emotional harmonization, an AI broadcast capable of subtly altering human emotional response through subliminal frequencies embedded in streaming platforms and smart devices. It won't kill anyone, he said. It'll just remove what makes us human. His breathing quickened. The lights behind him began to flicker. They found me, he muttered. The feed glitched violently, static washing across the screen. For a second, his face split into two overlapping images, one screaming, one smiling. Sound, distorted high-pitched tone, like a digital scream. Then, silence. For almost 30 seconds, the screen remained black. Then came a new image, an empty classroom, the same one seen before. On the chalkboard, a new phrase had appeared, scrawled in uneven handwriting, he told the truth. A faint figure stood at the back of the room, small, unmoving. A child. As the camera slowly zoomed in, the figure tilted its head. The smile stretched wider than natural. The feed cut out. Soft, continuous static hum. Within hours, the video disappeared from every platform. Those who had downloaded copies reported that the files became corrupted, replaced by looping clips of people smiling. Some said their webcams turned on by themselves. Sound, faint mechanical click, like a camera shutter. But fragments of the broadcast survived. A few cyber investigators pieced together snippets from cached archives. One particularly disturbing clip showed what appeared to be Eli's final moments. He was no longer speaking into the camera. He was staring at something off-screen. His expression calm, almost serene. Then he said, "I can see them now. The children. They're not gone. They're inside the light." He turned toward the lens, smiled faintly, and whispered, "It's beautiful." Then his image froze, mid-smile, and the feed faded into a symbol, the original Brookvale logo, the smiling sun. Underneath it appeared new text, "Smile. You're almost home." Music resumes, soft piano blended with digital interference, slowly rising in volume. In the days following the broadcast, strange anomalies were reported worldwide. Phone cameras malfunctioning. Streaming platforms crashing at midnight. Some viewers claimed to hear faint laughter when they closed their laptops. Others described seeing faces in static screens, eyes watching, smiling.